Commissioners.
Good morning, sir.
We're going to go over the Charlotte Ranchettes presentation that we've posted. Just some background. We met with you all on December 19th of 2017 to kind of start trying to look at this issue and come up with a solution of how we can navigate through it. You give us some direction and said, meet with them, find out what they would like to do, and then we'd go from there. So what we're going to do in this presentation is tell you what's transpired since then. We did do some outreach, which we'll discuss. We have some recommendations, and then we want to hear what the commissioners have to say.
Good morning. So with the Ranchettes, the original creation...
Your name for the record. I'm sorry, I should have asked John to do the same thing, but that's all right.
Operations supervisor with Public Works. The Charlotte Ranchettes MSB was officially created...
Make sure the lights are on and make sure the microphone's really close to your mouth.
Okay. Is that better?
Speak loudly.
Okay. This MSB was officially created in 1991 by an ordinance. We had an informal advisory board that staff would meet with to go over recommendations, and in 2006 that became a formal advisory board, which staff meets with to go over different areas and things that they do in their MSBU. The majority of this is going to be on the dirt roads in the Ranchettes, but I just want to note that there's about 1.5 miles, 2 miles of paved roads in the Ranchettes that were done under a separate capital program that they had paved themselves back in the early 2000s. So this is an aerial map. The black is showing all of the dirt roads, and then the yellow are those paved roads that were paved by that capital assessment.
Sorry, Commissioners, John Elias for the record. So what we want to talk about is, and this is a conversation that we've had at other meetings as well, as levels of service and providing adequate levels of service. So currently, basic maintenance should include road grading and asphalt maintenance where applicable, to maintain, of course, a safe and passable route for residents and core emergency services. A huge component of this, and in meeting with the group out there, they agree as well, swale grading to ensure the roadway can drain properly. One of the issues that you have with any road system, specifically dirt roads, it's even exacerbated, is if you don't have the drainage maintained next to it, the water ponds on the road creates issues and the road breaks down much quicker. These roadside swales would convey the water to outfalls and major outfalls. One of the other things that we would need to make sure we're addressing out there is signage installation and safety mowing and brush control to ensure line of sight and clear recovery zones. Unfortunately, the current maintenance level that we're getting is minimal road grading and brush control. Of course, resident dissatisfaction levels are extremely high, which we understand. An adequate work program cannot be established at the current or previously proposed funding levels. And I have this to put in here. It should be noted that the MSBU advisory board that we work with, they do amazing work for what we have to work with. With that said, they had asked us to increase the assessment the last budget cycle to double their assessment. And at that time, knowing that we needed to take a deeper dive into this, which is what we're presenting today, we didn't feel that the doubling of the assessment would be adequate. So we didn't want to double the assessment and still really get no improvement from the scenario or from that assessment and what it would provide. So that's why staff asked at that time not to increase the assessment until we could take this deeper dive to take a look into it. One of the other issues that
Commissioner Constance.
I mean, it sounds like we're going to be, at the end of your presentation, if I read ahead, that we're going to hopefully take a step to, increase assessments and then do more, or at least maintain a really standard level and then move forward from there. So had we known that back then, it probably would have been a good idea to increase the assessment. Even though things wouldn't have changed for the moment, we would have built up some revenue and some reserves for future activities and then moving into phases of paving down the road. But I guess we got to use that money within a certain period of time. The one question I had, though, so far I'm on board with everything you're doing here. One thing that I don't see, though, is the alignment of the roads. Is that going to be addressed at some point as we phase forward to paving, if that happens in 20 years or whatever? But, you know, when will that get done? And that has to be done at the right time, because you don't want to keep working on roads that aren't even in the right place. So how will you be phasing that forward? And you don't have to answer that now if you're going to answer that later. So
Yeah, we'll definitely address it. We have two
Okay.
roads that are more problematic than others, but
Okay.
we do intend to
Thank you,
at
Mr.
least,
Chairman.
address that.
Excuse me, John, I got Commissioner Deutsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the last 15 years or so, as I can remember, is that, you know, folks in the ranchettes like the dirt roads. They like it the way it is. They're happy. They don't want to change anything. And this pretty much was a tradition, because people, you know, or accepted mentality that folks out in the ranchettes were happy the way it was. So I'm going to guess that either some of those folks, if that was the case, and it was accepted, pretty much that either the demographics of the area have changed, or people have changed their minds, and I think we're receptive to wanting to work with them and understand that. But all of a sudden now it seems like more and more people do want something done. Can you give me some sort of background, John, and bring me up, like, what's created this transformation in the last couple of years, really?
And we'll kind of go over that, but just to capture it in a brief answer, it's a combination of three things. It's the county looking at it like we need to protect the infrastructure and the traveling public. That's one. Two, you are experiencing growth out there, and with growth you get a different demo with people wanting different expectations. And three, with that growth, you're putting a pressure on the infrastructure that's there, and it's starting to exacerbate the issues that have been there all along. So it's threefold, and we kind of go over that in the presentation.
We talked about it. We talked about it a little bit in our one-on-ones. As I recall, you guys had some frustration because you don't have any real consistency from a definite percentage of the people there. Like, where do we go from here, and what should we be doing? Has that changed at all?
Well, and I put my mic extremely close. We kind of go over that as to what we gathered from the public meetings that we had, and we can probably go to the next slide, and we'll start talking about that right now.
So for our outreach efforts, as the board had asked us to do back a little over a year ago, we meet quarterly with the advisory board, got kind of some input with them. We've recently had 2 citizen input meetings. The end of October, I did 2 evening meetings at South County Park to try to gather some more input. They were very well attended. I'm going to say we had about 75 people at both of them, and staff has continued to receive emails and different input from residents from that time. We explained when we held those meetings that was the request of the board, that we get out there and gather the input. It wasn't that we were telling them what we were going to do. It was we want any and all ideas, no matter how crazy they may be, and that we would present everything to the board, whether we felt it was a feasible idea or not. So some of their input was funding from other sources. Add another 1-cent gas tax to help improve their roads, utilize general fund or the current gas tax, create a new impact fee for new construction out there, and specifically have people improve the road when they're building a home, do a one-time extra assessment to use for public works to go in and do drainage, increase the rate, and it varied from $100 to $400 an acre, and then reduce it once there was some type of a completion done. Change method from an MSBU to an MSTU. A couple people had requested that we pave one road from Vermont to Jones Loop, so that there was one through road, and then slowly work our way out to the east and west from there. Use MSBU funds only for drainage and allow the citizens to continue to maintain the dirt roads. Cap the roads with millings, which we do have several places in there where citizens have gone in, and when they build their house, they do put millings down on their own. Use old-fashioned block pavers instead of asphalt, and then bring everything back to in-house maintenance, because right now we contract it out, so we have to use some type of a standard, whereas if John will get into this in a little bit, but if we do it in-house, we have a little bit more control over what we're doing. We were requested that we take the actual easements, because as we've discussed, there is no right-of-way, by eminent domain, and then apply for grants to do the work. Increase the assessment as long as every street gets paved, not just that one. Dissolve the MSBU and let the citizens establish a POA. Dissolve the MSBU and let them maintain them. Both of them would be the same. We wouldn't have a control over, couldn't force them to do a POA as far as I know. And then they requested that we start having after-hours meetings to try to get more public input.
So what Tara did was give you a synopsis, and we categorized all the different feedback that we got. And to reiterate what she said, when we had the public hearings, we wanted to gather as much information as we could. So if something in our thoughts didn't seem like it made sense, we didn't bring that up then. We were literally just brainstorming, and you guys, the MSBU and the folks that live in the Ranchettes, tell us options that you would want us to consider. So that's what that was about. We came back, we crunched all that data, we put it to in a synopsis like Tara just presented, and what we've concluded is the Charlotte Ranchettes is a growing community with a diverse population demographic. This, to your point, Commissioner Deutsch, makes this reaching a consensus on a plan to address this a very complex issue, and we couldn't get a synopsis. With that said, we couldn't get one direction that everybody felt that we needed to go in. With that said, the one thing that everybody did agree with is that the current maintenance levels that are provided aren't adequate and are underfunded. It should also be noted that as part of this conversation, we'd had previous conversations with Charlotte County School Board as well as Chief Van Helton with emergency services, because there's concerns no matter what we're doing now or how we move forward in the future, making sure that we can address those services that we provide, as well as waste management, I should say, as well. And that's been problematic in the past because sometimes the roads get to a level that's created issues for us. So the synopsis is that we couldn't reach a single consensus, but the roads and the maintenance is not adequate. So here's where we come to staff recommendations. Staff recommends that Charlotte County should not maintain any dirt roads on the mainland. This would mean transitioning all dirt or shell roads on the mainland into a paving program at some point in the future, and it is understood that this process could take several years to fund and implement. It should also be noted, just from a historical perspective, that this approach was attempted probably in the 1990s. We actually had in South County or the Punta Gorda area, and I think we even had it in Mid County as well, a Marl Road District or a Shell Road District. And what that basically meant is it was a district that generated funds just to take care of those roads. And at some point in the 90s, there's an analysis done of that and realized that when you have dirt roads, and we're gonna see this theme throughout this presentation, by not capping that dirt road with paving, you're throwing money into the wind. It literally, you put down material that's as structural as it can be, cars beat it up, weather, erosion, and it just turns into dust, and eventually you have to put additional material down. So during the 90s, an evaluation was done of the Marl Road District, and it was determined that we should not be grading roads at that time, and we made a program to transition to where all those roads were eventually paved. Where we ended up with the Ranchettes is a situation that I think she pointed out when we actually started going in there, and it kind of got us back into that. The other dirt roads that we maintain on the mainland, and there's some specifics to why we say on the mainland, because we maintain dirt roads on the barrier islands, and there's still some issues with that we don't want to include them into this because there's some grant funding and access issues. So with that said, with the proposal that staff is recommending is that we wouldn't maintain dirt roads any longer on the mainland, and the impacts wouldn't be just to the Ranchettes. It'd be roads like Farabee, as well as a couple roads in TGA, Tropical Gulf Acres. So we had some approaches here that we wanted to discuss, and what we really we took a deep dive into the analyzing what we think would be required for us to maintain this to where people would see a significant improvement in the level of service that they have, at the same time not paving it. So the program that we're presenting here isn't to pave the road, but it would be to get the roads to a position where at some point in the future an additional assessment could be levied, in which the roads would be in a much better position to pave. So what we're recommending is, one approach is that staff, we raise it from $100 per acre to $400 per acre to fund the maintenance of the MSBU until a proper paving program can be implemented. And we kind of broke this down into some big numbers. $200,000 for staffing, and this is a key component to this, as Tara indicated earlier. This would be to bring all the maintenance that we're doing out there in-house. One of the issues that we've had currently with the current levels of the current funding and requests from the MSBU at a different time was that they thought we could get a better bang for our buck with outsourcing the grading. Well, unfortunately for us, that we have to draw these contracts up, and one of the ways that we draw up the contracts is that we have to create a standard, and that standard's FDOT standard, and that creates a certain standard for the material and for the way that you do the work. And if we didn't apply that standard, it would be very difficult to hold the contractor responsible. Where when we did this in-house, we know our staff would know what it would take to make our liability and make the residents out there happy, but it wouldn't still be that same FDOT standard that we're holding the contractor to. So we feel it would give us some more flexibility. So that $200,000 for staffing would be for 3 full-time employees that could do not only grading but additional drainage work out there and brush work almost year-round. This next number is a big one, is $250,000 for material. Right now, the assessment that for the Ranchettes doesn't even get that much for all the work in the entire Ranchette. So that right there would be $250,000 just in materials to get the roads brought up. One of the questions that we were asked throughout this process is, how long would the average person take before they seen an improvement? And we're saying that we think everybody would have a marked improvement within the first year, because we'd be able to be in there full time and addressing these, putting material on any road that needs it. We're going to show you a flyover if the technology works later and show you some of the challenges we have. Additional $50,000 would be for brush work. We just recently, in the last couple of years, started doing brush work out there. And to Commissioner Constance's point, without the roads being in the right spot and without a right-of-way existing, technically that's been problematic for us in the past, because anywhere we cut brush, we're cutting brush on private property. So we can't do that. But if the brush is growing into where the road's at, we also have to maintain access. So that would also include $30,000 for sign installation throughout the Ranchettes and $2,000 annually for maintenance.
John, a question on the material, $250,000, is that going to be shell material that can eventually become the base course for the resurfacing, for the paving program?
That was our plan. It should be noted, it wouldn't strictly be shell material. There's going to be roads that we could show you in here that we might have to start out with riprap and then build up to, smaller aggregate and eventually the shell material. But the material, to your point, would be, and that's what we're maintaining, is if we started this now and did this for several years, we would have a much better base course for paving at some point in the future.
Go ahead, sir.
Quick, how many acres is out there? Is it 1,200, 1,500?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think we had a number of how many units were impacted, and I think
it's right around 2,000.
2,000, okay.
And 72 of them are in the paved area.
So using this approach to continue, is this would significant increase will allow for minimum funding and required maintenance, and this would allow road and drainage that currently does not exist to be brought to a standard that can then be transitioned to paving, as we just pointed out. One of the things that we want to point out, and if you've had any input from the residents as we have, that we can't stress enough, is that really what we're talking about doing here is addressing the road issue, but it should be noted that we would also be trying to address a lot of the drainage issue. If you talk on the south end towards Alligator Creek, most of that drainage is easy to figure out. You're going right to the creek. Staff can do that without a comprehensive drainage study being done. There's significant east-west ditches that we can work with in the middle, and then you have your rim ditches on Strauss as well as 74 that we can drain to. But this does not include any huge survey project or any huge drainage study. And one of the issues that's happened out there over the years is that residents and just erosion have filled backyard ditches where this was designed to drain. So these full-time employees would try to create roadside swales that would at least create some capacity, if not water to be moved to the major outfalls.
John, you talked about the labor, you talked about materials. What about your equipment? You going to lease it?
Well, we would look at that. And back to the point when we had the Marl Road District, we actually had 2 full-time grading crews with large graders. We did actually put a grader in our budget to buy because we think this program is going to be at least 10 years to 15 years potentially before we could transition to paving. But if we thought leasing would be a better option, we could of course explore that.
Again, it depends on how many years this program is going to be in place.
Sure.
If we're trying to, as a policy, remove from your responsibility all dirt roads except for the islands, that piece of equipment wouldn't be very useful.
Well, our capital equipment right now is equipment this size would be like a 10-year replacement. So we're anticipating that this hitting this pretty hard would be at least 3 to 4 years in the Ranchettes, but most likely 10 before we could figure out what we want to do for an assessment to pave.
One other question, and I think you answered it when we met one-on-one one time, was that how many of our neighboring counties maintain publicly dedicated dirt roads?
I was baffled when we did some research on this. We couldn't find another local government agency that maintains dirt roads.
Including DeSoto County?
Including DeSoto County. DeSoto County had indicated that any of their roads that are dirt roads are either private or somebody else maintains it. It's not their responsibility.
I wanted to kind of get that on the record. Thank you.
Good point.
We had a aerial presentation that we wanted to present, which staff had created to just take a main road going through the Ranchettes, which is, what was the road? Alfred, from where it's briefly paved on 74, or I'm sorry, from Jones Loop in a couple blocks. We wanted to show what it would look like putting that all the way through to 74, and it really what the emphasis was on that flyover was that you see that there's a paved portion, a dirt road, and then it just gets almost to a winding trail to almost going through a swampy area. What would be our intent would be to put roads everywhere there should be roads. And to Commissioner Constance's point earlier, we do have some flexibility with the location of the road. The roads can be, what did we determine, 50 foot on each side of the property line?
The easements are 40 foot, so we have an 80-foot path that we can put the road in that easement.
And most of them, when you look at it, aren't that far out. We have 2 significant roads that are going to be a completely different challenge to approach, and that's portions of Grove and portions of Strauss on the, I guess it'd be the east side of the Ranchettes. They're so far out that that would be significant to try to relocate those.
Putting flags in the ground.
Yeah.
So they know it's coming. Okay. So
This computer.
So we're not going to see the video. Some other time, I guess, we can see that.
The PowerPoint that's posted on the agenda, it works on there from your computers in your office.
Very good.
So at this point, we'll open it up to any questions or comments that the commission may have.
Commissioner Teseo, go ahead, and then Commissioner Conrad.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In looking at the proposed assessment, I know we had an issue with the habitat plan that we have regarding density model versus acreage. I want to make sure that we don't run in, if we discuss that route, we don't get into that same problem of how these assessments would work, because we did have that problem with the habitat plan where we tried to readjust, and that's different because it's federal level, but the concept is, people with multiple acres, has that all been taken into consideration? What's the average acreage out there? What does the actual assessment really mean for these folks?
Sure, we did look at that. and I don't know if it's part of this presentation, but at one point throughout this process, we tried to evaluate the average property size out there, I believe is an acre and a quarter.
Acre and a quarter.
So they basically pay $125 assessment per year.
So then that would be 500.
Yeah, so the new rate would take that from $100 an acre, or 125, to basically 400 an acre,
Plus the extra quarter.
plus the extra quarter, which would basically make it 500. And again, the feedback that we've gotten from the group, nobody wants to see an assessment this large, but most people that we've talked to from the unit agree that this you're going to have a significant increase to do any of the work that we want to do out there.
Yeah, I mean, in looking at the scope of what needs to be done, the magnitude is just huge. I mean, I look at slide 4, and you look at the amount of roads in there that have to be done. You cannot do a road program unless you address the drainage. It'd be a complete mess to try and implement an expensive road program and not do a complete drainage plan. But otherwise, it'll undermine the road or cause problems down the road, so to speak.
Mr. Morrison, I'm sure, who's in the audience, is shaking his head and agreeing because he had several conversations with us about this. It should be noted that this program really addresses the roads more than anything, but with our staff doing it, we can actually create material that over time is spilled out into the roadside areas, bring that up onto the road to help build road base and to create some capacity for drainage next to the road, as well as ditches that are in easements that we can currently clean out. These same crews could also do that.
I mean, the other thing, school of thought is, and I've spoken to folks too, and I used to have a place and lived on a dirt road. It's not as if the Ranchettes always had paved roads. It's a dirt road community. It's sold as a rural ranchette community with dirt roads. So there's an understanding by a lot of those folks, that's what they bought and paid for, was that setting with these dirt roads. Some say, well, leave our roads alone, don't touch our roads. Then you get some who want that higher level of service. So it's been a real mixed bag. I know when I lived on a dirt road, we had our own machinery, we maintained our dirt road. The county didn't do anything. I mean, we had I was up in Ocala, Dunellen, so we pretty much, for 10 years did a lot of our own work, and we had a box blade. But, when I came on the board 2 years ago, I think this was on one of the very first or second agendas when I came on here, was still kicking it down the road with no clear direction. I've never had an issue, well, in the 2 years I've been here. Usually we come to a consensus with that much time. We figure things out, you look at the facts, you get public input, there's a clear direction. I still don't have a clear direction from the people out there, and I don't know if we should, I know we've been doing it through you in the quarterly meetings, if we should have a meeting where the commissioners can get input with the people and see for ourselves firsthand, have a meeting where they can talk to us and we can talk back and ask questions, have that type of setting. I know we might be opening up a can of worms, but I'm not comfortable with this whole thing because I've gotten so many different mixed signals on how to approach this and what people want. And we're talking about a pretty big long-term assessment here. This isn't going to be a cheap thing. This is going to be very, very expensive. And you look at all the options on how to pay for it. I don't want to get into the impact fee discussion again, but I'm just saying, I'm not really sure what direction I want to go in on this thing without having my own personal interaction with the folks out there in some type of setting.
We'll have good news for you.
Yeah, at the public hearing,
Public hearing.
No, I don't think that's
You get
enough.
plenty of public
No.
input.
That's what I'm saying is that's when it's too late. When, you have a public hearing, then we have to vote. I'm talking about getting in on the ground floor, like a workshop with the people out there, before it gets to us, before it gets to the public. That's what I'm trying to say. Do we get out there with the folks, attend a meeting, listen to what they have to say, get that directly from them? I've had people call me with completely opposite. Literally, people have told me, don't touch our roads. And some people have said, we want them paved. And some people have said, no, we want somewhere in the middle. We just want a higher level of service with the dirt roads. So how do you decide with that many different opinions with such a costly endeavor?
Can I respectfully, one of the drivers that I think that we're trying to present is with the growth that you're seeing out there, and we understand that you're still going to have a diverse opinion on how we should proceed. if we're going to maintain it and be responsible for it, staff is recommending that we have to address it. We have to address it to even support the growth that they're experiencing now.
Health,
The-
welfare, and safety.
you literally can't, if the houses are being built, which they are right now, we've already gotten complaints that we had to build a road to even get to the house so they could build it. So
Here's the thing, though. They knew that. You buy out there, it's not like there were paved roads, we took them away. Let the buyer beware. You know what you're getting. You do your due diligence. You know you've got a dirt road community. So in that respect, I mean, I'm not sympathetic in that way, because you know what you're getting if you're moving out there. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Commissioner Constance and Commissioner Deutsch.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. These are going to be very big numbers, and it's tough. The problem is that we are maintaining the roads. We are currently maintaining the roads. So we really have two choices. Stop completely, which really is not tenable, or we've got to go up to a level that is in line with what we do everywhere else and actually move forward into a place where there are roads that are, and it's not, the problem is it's 2019, FDOT standards, not 1980 where it's like, we'll just throw some pavement down there and it's good enough, okay? We actually have to, there's a certain minimum standard and it's very expensive. Thank you, Tallahassee. So that's the way it is. I kind of like that idea, though, of starting with at least one pipeline road. I mean, that's down the road for paving, but, where you really create a very good initial road, and hopefully folks use that so that as there's more development and there are more trucks and cars and vehicles running on it, they select the paved road to get pretty much as far as they're going to go and then move to where they're going to be, and that makes it a little bit less intense on the other roads until you can start doing that. So it's going to be interesting to see how you strategize, because obviously you're not going to pave out the whole thing at once, but there'll be a phased approach. So that was it. I'm sure that was suggested. And Commissioner Tseo, the other thing is this: I wanted to take an opportunity to thank John and Tara and the team for the multiple meetings. I mean, to talk about something that's been very tough to deal with just logistically, and they've gone out there and they've, this has been a 2-year process of just getting information and going out there and trying to figure this out. It has not been an easy thing to solve. It's going to continue to not be easy, but the outreach has been tremendous, and I really appreciate the efforts of this team. So thank you.
Thank you for making those points, Commissioner. And again, on the spine road, whatever it is, I think that becomes the art of all this, to try to identify a roadway, working with the attorney's office to make sure we can define the road that provides the benefit to all the properties initially. Essentially, a good north-south spine in there will benefit everybody to be able to get in and out of there. So I appreciate your comments, though. Commissioner Deutsch.
Thank you. Yeah, it certainly doesn't make sense to keep trying to throw good money after bad. And, I appreciate what the staff has done, and I'm not sure a public meeting would accomplish anything more than you guys have done at this point. And, people want to contact us, they do. The reality is, I think it's clear you don't have a consensus. And Joe, after 2 years, you're never going to please everyone. I'm sure you figured that out real quick. I think the concept of doing the pipeline or the initial road and doing it in a way that we're not really throwing everything away, that it's going to be headed towards the fact that it could be used positively as a base if we move ahead. Frankly, I think that makes some sense. I think that should be where we're heading. One of two things are going to happen. Some of the people that don't want us to do anything at all are going to say, hey, that's not so bad. Maybe we ought to take another look at it. And or the opposite side is that, they should have left it the way it was. So I tend to think what you've suggested makes some sense, and maybe that's the way we ought to head. And my thought would be to give that a shot and to go. And again, thanks for what you guys have done. I'm sure you've experienced firsthand the frustration that we experience all the time.
It should be noted, too, I just made a note to myself, is that the MSBU and the neighborhood activists out there have been extremely helpful and instrumental in helping us shape and develop ideas and try to come up with solutions. if I don't say it again, I'll probably get beat up for it, but drainage is going to be a key component to this, and this doesn't really take a deep dive into the drainage, but it does address some drainage issues.
John,
and
could you
helps
give
with
us, just take another minute if you don't mind, could you give us a little bit of a timeline? Let's say if we go ahead and we,
Next question, sir.
oh, well, I'm glad I did that to someone, because Constance and Teseo do that to me all the time. You help make my day. But, you know, maybe you could give us some idea if we moved ahead on this, you know, are they looking at a road 2-3 years down the road as a possibility, or is it 5 or 10 years? Just give us a little feeling for that.
Well,
Thank you, Mr.
I'll let
Chair.
Tara address part of this, but due to the budget cycle and having to get this started, I think you had set it up to where you'd already put the assessment in there in the event that we want to do it, so that the public hearing could be on the horizon. But
Yes. What I've done is in our draft budgets, because we're doing the 2-year cycle, I've already put it in at the $400 an acre, knowing that you guys can always lower it, never raise it. So put it in with that hopes, and that will help us start come October getting some of this work started, so that the residents can see, okay, this is what we're really going to get. It's working. This is good. And then our plan would be to work with the county engineer's office, come up with the advisory board, work on a program of how far out do you, it'll be probably 5-6 years. They're going to need to bite that bullet at that cost before we throw here it's going to be this dollar amount to transition into an actual paving issue. So
Now,
I don't foresee paving
I
within.
think what
5-6 years at minimal.
Yeah, what I think I heard also is what would be the timeline of how we proceed just with this program. So we would increase the assessment if we got board and administration approval to hire the staff. We have some staff that we could put there, but we're spread super thin right now. We could start putting staff there. We do have a smaller grader that we could utilize in the interim. We could start putting material down as soon as I think we even have money in there now.
Yes.
Because we did a big FEMA project. That was another thing that played into this timeline, is that we had some storm damage out there, and we wanted to see how that would impact the roads and how much that would cost. But to respond directly, I think what we would have to do is get the assessment raised. We have some money in there that we could put some staff right now without hiring the 3 FTEs to go in there and start doing work and grading the roads now, patching roads. I want Tara to go over how we would address the paving part too, because I don't think we covered that clearly. But we would start with then purchase this equipment in the upcoming year, and we'd be in there as soon as possible and making the roads better and creating drainage, cutting brush back as soon as we can. So
Being constantly mindful that the drainage is a major issue. So I'm going to understand that as you begin to do this, any efforts that you make affecting drainage would only lead us to where we're going to eventually have to be going, because that's going to be a major issue. If and when those roads are paved, where is all that water going to go? And I'm sure that's a challenge, and that's going to be on your mind all the time.
One of the things I know John wanted me to point out is, as I had said in the beginning, this $400 an acre is for the dirt road portion. Well, at the same time, on the backside, the increase is also going to be for the paved portion, because they're gearing up to get to their 20 years and they're getting ready to be resurfaced, which my estimate going out a couple years is it's going to be about $400 a year for a 15-year cycle, as we've been doing the 15-year paybacks to get those roads resurfaced. So it was kind of ironic as we ran the numbers that the same people on the paved road are paying $400 and have a paved surfaced road, and $400 will just be the minimum to do the work on the dirt road with the same assessment.
I think it would be helpful to me, Ray, I guess, if long before we get to the actual public hearing on the MSBU increase, that we maybe have another, in a workshop environment, possibly kind of the work program for this next year, to kind of see in a little bit more detail how we're attacking this, and decisions will have been made, or recommendations will have been made as to whether you're leasing equipment, buying equipment. I think you've got the basic concept pretty well defined, but I guess when you're at a point to be able to close close ranks on some of these other details, and before we get to an actual public hearing, because that will occur, MSBU public hearing, when, July?
Yes. Will we be able to do that? We used to do the May workshop for anything that we were going to do a rate increase on the MSBU's. Would that be?
You guys just, figure it out and see what makes sense. Let us know where we need to be. Let's figure it out. Let's figure it out. Any other questions, comments, commissioners?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, how much of the property out there, I might have missed this, is vacant, occupied, unoccupied?
I do not. I can get back to you with an exact figure. I don't know. The majority of it's vacant.
Yeah, because I'm wondering how many people are paying attention to what's going on, and when they get the card in the mail, that, with an assessment on a vacant piece of property that
I
they're.
will say this: they have very active
Social media
groups. They communicate very well with each other. That I'd be very surprised if there's many people that don't know that this is out there. And at our last MSBU meeting, we did even already throw the $400 figure out. It's been a discussion. We've had several residents come in and meet with John and I and have gone over this game plan as to what exactly we were going to present to you today.
Well, we'll see how good social media is in those terms, because when you get the card and the assessments coming, then people, start saying, hey, what's going on in my neighborhood? I didn't really know. I didn't have all the facts.
We did mail, just so you know, we did mail a card to everybody for those 2 public hearings, which is one reason that we got such a good outreach. So every property owner did get notification for that.
Very good. All set, commissioners? Good.